to me. Yo ho, yo ho, it's talk like a pirate day. When laptops are benches, God gave us our...
We're getting near to election time now, and being a manly man who actually cares about his nation in the old-fashioned pre-9/11 version of patriotism the way that we used to, I've been paying very close attention. What has been most interesting to me isn't whether or not McCain's a liar, or Obama's a liar, or Biden's a liar, or Palin is the Antichrist, but rather the way the passing of political information has changed over the years. You see, news organizations used to have something called reputation, which they actually cared about, so a reporter could only get away with so much. His biases were sneaky things, almost like the well-dressed spies in a James Bond movie, sneaking in and out of his article, gently laying traps for the reader, coercing him to favor one opponent over the other, and sleeping with really hot women with really unusual names like Pussy Galore, and ordering high-class snooty drinks prepared in a particularly snooty ways, if to mock us even more for our lack of snooty drinks and women named after the colloquial term for a sexual organ. Anyway, the point is that while biases were prevalent and a lot of journalists were undoubtedly lying scum who deserved to be drop-kicked off the face of the earth and never ever be played by Robert Redford in the movie version, they were still at least in some ways bound to the truth. If a newspaper lied outright, they became a laughingstock, and pretty soon people would stop believing them, and they become sort of like that newspaper from the supermarket checkout line, which I was sad to hear isn't being made anymore, because now I'll never know the truth about Bad Boy unless I see the musical. However, after 9/11, or really after Vietnam, or really after World War II, or really after World War I, but mostly after 9/11, the truth seems to act very much like bread and milk whenever there's a hint of snow in the South, i.e. it's nowhere to be found. The news media is now free to say the most outrageous lies about the candidates, and they completely get away with it with no twisting or apologies necessary if they get caught. This is the only reason that people thought Al-Qaeda was working with Saddam Hussein and that Barack Obama was a Muslim for so long, because the news media just out and lied to us, and it didn't matter whether you got your news from television, newspapers, or the quote-unquote legitimate internet news sites, they were still lies. In this kind of outrageous atmosphere, finding a reporter who would do an honest-to-God investigative piece of journalism with some sort of standards attached became very much like trying to find an atheist who was voting for Huckabee. On the rare occasions one would rear its head, they survived only briefly before being hit with a thumpstick of Hillary's wine or Obama's fictional lack of content or Sarah Palin's tits, and be banished back to the black hole where news agencies keep all their honest reporters until they become so embittered that they don't care anymore and start saying stupid things like our news is fair and balanced. So in an effort to find truth, you go to the only possible place you can look, which is of course the internet, because while the internet's reliability is about as steady as a schizophrenic ferret thrown on a trampoline filled with bouncy balls and hosed down with sugar water, you can at least find truth there if you look hard enough and relentlessly check your facts. Which means that my daily ritual of reading the news has now grown to several hours long due to all the research I have to put in, and that's just on the articles I feel are vitally important to the nation and my own well-being, and have nothing to do with the articles that I really want to read, such as the ones about how the Large Hadron Collider are going to blow up the world, because God knows that it's 8 years past the millennium and 4 years before the Mayan calendar ends, so that if we don't have another apocalypse scare, then people are going to stop going to church and start thinking for themselves. Which neatly segues me to the biggest offender we have on the lack of truth front, and that is fear, because fear drives people to the voting booths. Whether it's Obama trying to make you afraid that John McCain will cut Social Security and leave you alone and starving and penniless on the cold streets until you have to turn into Jessica Alba and start dancing for Bruce Willis just to make ends meet, or whether it's McCain telling you to ignore the last 50 years of history because Al-Qaeda just suddenly appeared out of the mouth of hell and had nothing to do with American foreign policy bungling during the Cold War, and they might bomb your house specifically any moment because they are made of evil and sauce, and the sauce is also evil. A good rule of thumb is that if a candidate is appealing to fear, they are full of lies and should be swiftly kicked in the head. But all the candidates are full of lies and should be swiftly kicked in the head, so what can we do? Well, the only thing we can do is vote for the person whom we feel is the least scummy, which for me is Obama, but only because I'm interested in having a functioning country and Ron Paul didn't get the nomination, but we're not going to talk about my personal choices in this rant, and start trying to change the culture of those around us. What we need are more and more people who are fed up with Bill O'Reilly, Keith Olbermann, Anderson Cooper, and pretty much everybody else in news and actually want to start getting truth. And then we need them to start making a whole lot of noise about it and to stop watching television for God's sake and start reading the internet. So where do you start? Well, you can get some good basic tips at www.factcheck.org and www.politifact.com, which are excellent fact-checking sites, but the problem is they don't check enough, and once the presidential race is over, they'll go into near dormancy until the next one. So beyond that, start checking out the BBC, because the Brits don't really give a dog's bollocks, which supposedly is a good thing over there, and so are less likely to be biased, and check out as many independent news sites on both sides as you possibly can. Yes, I know that's a lot of work, but this is what we have to do to get the country back on track, because the only people who don't acknowledge that we're quickly spiraling down into a great big ocean of crap are the same people who have been railing against for the past 3.5 minutes. So get off your couch and start doing your own research. It's not like the next video you watch will be all that interesting. It'll probably be bleeding Harry Potter puppet pals or something.
He's much like me, and me, oh.